Most CPTOs come from engineering or product. Ines did not. She started in telecom operations, running incident management at 2 in the morning, then moved into product, then growth, then into the leadership role most people treat as the finish line. Along the way, she picked up computer science degree, a marketing degree, a business design postgrad, and went through Reforge. And that combination is unusual. Not the credentials themselves, but what they produce. Someone who has been in the war room when systems break, fought for roadmap space as a PM, run pricing experiments as a growth lead, and then had to connect all of it as an exec. That full stack view of how organizations actually work, from the incident ticket to the board deck, is exactly why I wanted her on the show. Most guests can speak to one or two of those layers. Ines has lived all of them. Ines, welcome to Product Org Unmasked.
Hi there, and first of all, thank you so much for having me. It's really, a pleasure to be here. I follow you for a while, and you have impact in me even without knowing. So, thank you so much for that. Yes, I have a very unusual, path. I started to work full time when I was 16. In clothes shops, and then I started in support, and I was also a mother very early. I have an adult child next year, so I always had to provide for myself. That's why I had to always do a lot of different things at the same time, university while working full time, and I had opportunities. My first opportunity was in support when I was in university, learning computer science. And basically my full career, I always looked into people that I admire and that were doing things that I thought that were really cool, and I start to act like them, being very curious on how they would learn. And this was how I went through all my career, and I think it's really, really unusual, support and business analyst, PM, and growth, which was mind blowing for me. I had so much fun doing growth, and now being a CPTO in this age of AI, I am having the time of my life. Honestly, it's so cool, and I feel so blessed and so lucky to have this opportunity.
Wow, what a crazy story. It reminds me of my own story. I'm a mom of 4 as well. I have 2 adult children as well. I also started working with 16. It's like you are my twin from a different mother, which is funny. And I think that happens to you as well. It looks good on paper. It sounds good when told as a story. And I admire your story. It's inspiring. At the same time, I think it was not always just easy and glamorous. What was the hardest part of all of that?
Yeah. So I'm a mother of 3 as well. Especially in my early career, because I was a single mother for my first child. Literally in the beginning of my career, I had months that I didn't have money to buy food in the end of the month. And I think that this was what made me click on being super ambitious and making sure that I would never let my kids go through that ever again. But I also needed to do something that I'm super passionate about, and that drove all my decision careers through all these more than 20 years of career.
Yeah, I can imagine that. That was a tough story when you went through it, but at the same time, the learnings you picked from it and the person you are today wouldn't be there if you haven't had that journey. Nice.
Absolutely. It shaped me, and I'm so grateful for that. And this was my full career as well, because it teaches you having empathy. And empathy, it's especially for a product person, it's a superpower.
Yeah. Also, remembering where you're coming from helps you to embrace more where you are today.
Absolutely.
You've built growth at User-Centrics. I love that story because growth is the thing that everyone's talking about right now. Everyone wants to understand growth loops, work in growth, use AI to make growth a thing. You've been there, and your User-Centric story is quite interesting. Walk me a little bit through your time at User-Centrics.
Yes, it was a magic opportunity that I had at User-Centrics, because basically I joined when we were really just 20 people doing less than 1 million, completely sales led, and I This was before COVID, and the reason why I joined back then was that I really wanted to have this international experience. And before COVID, it wasn't that easy to have this international experience while living in Portugal. And I met the CPTO by chance, and he sold me on the idea of, changing the world through data privacy. And when I joined, we were starting to sell into this, first big customers. Everyone would do really a little bit of everything. There wasn't like product and engineering and all these different departments. And I started to, since I felt very accountable for the success of the company, to start to search on, okay, how can we grow? And back then there wasn't like information like this today, around PLG and growth in general from a product perspective in Europe. So what I've done was to look into products that I really liked, and in that moment it was Airbnb and Canva, and I started to search in LinkedIn what did the people that actually grew the product, what were their path, what did they learn. And this was how I found back then, Lenny Rashivsky, Elena Verne. Lenny didn't even have a newsletter, but he was very active in Twitter. And I reached him out, and he suggested Reforge back then. And, this was how I started to connect with people that were already doing this. And, I did the first courses first with Elena Verne. That's how I met her back then. And I was super lucky because we were starting doing real product and user centrics, and I proposed to create a product growth team that would just focus on product distribution, while the product core team would focus on creating more TAM, and we would focus on the product distribution, the product experience, activation, and so on. And I put all the PMs in Reforge as well, everyone having their brains rewired with all this cool stuff. And the magic out of it was that the situation was like luck also for us, right? And I consider that luck is a mix of, an opportunity happening while you are prepared for it. The thing was that everything that we would do from a growth perspective, especially on activation, would magically have a lot of impact in the business, and then we had results. We started to be more and more relevant from a revenue perspective, and we started to grow pods. In the end, especially in the last 2 years, we would even drive stuff like the budget of the company. So we were very, very revenue oriented, extra skilled in the end when I left. And in the end, we had activation, acquisition and virality, partnerships, retention, monetization team as well. It was, it was very...
Wow, what you describe is a story that sounds magic and as if there was a lot of luck involved. At the same time,
a lot of luck.
I believe, but at the same time, I also believe that you as a very strong leader and a very ambitious leader as well, you also did a lot of hard work. And it does sound easy in hindsight, but you also said you had to upskill yourself. You had to upskill the PMs, and the company was sales-led when you joined. I think many people join sales-led organizations and then dream of convincing everyone to do product, not even talking about becoming product-led and installing growth teams. Now, I do not believe that that was only magic and luck. What was the hard part of that journey?
The hard part, so there was a lot of hard parts. When you take this decision to go from SLG to PLG, you need to understand that there will be a period of time that things get worse before they get better, right? If you think about, changing something as easy as changing your main CTA of the website from contact sales to start your trial, during a period of time, because although in the end, the product-led sales will compensate for it, if you do this really well, it will take time until you actually get those leads to feed sales. The first tries, of course, that this didn't went well. You need to find ways to compensate those leads for sales. I know that this is a cliche, but this is true. You need to start small. The first trials that we've done and so on were not even really connected in the back end. Was part of billing was still manual. But we did these first experiments and we show that there's something here. And then eventually people will buy your idea, but you need to have something to prove, and you always need to connect things to ARR, right? I mean, less and less it's ARR, other kinds of revenue, but you need to really connect like the outcome of the thing that you want to sell to very concrete high level outcomes that the executive team cares.
Okay, so PLG was not a thing. There were no real war stories from successful growth companies. Your company was sales led. You introduced growth loops. And in the beginning, you potentially failed because you had to introduce learning cycles. How did your sales team react? If you tell them like, hey guys, I'm taking away some sales leads, but trust me, everything will go down first, and you didn't know, but afterwards we're going to grow. How can I imagine that conversation with your sales team?
Like, I cannot take the credit on, on myself, of course. I was very lucky because although in the beginning the rest of the stakeholders, they were very difficult to convince, but at that point we also had the CMO joining that was super experienced in PLG, and I think that although I was, trying to sell that, like, she brought like that push, and our CEO there, Donna, she became also like a big fan of PLG, and she came from a sales background, so it helped there a lot. Like, one thing that I learned is that if you want to do these kind of things, you need executive sponsorship. It's not enough to have great ideas if you cannot convince your executive team to sponsor them.
Based on your learnings, which recommendation would you give someone in similar situations?
I mean, I think that the most important thing, if you want to pitch your idea and to have investment in your idea, is you need to understand what does your executive team care about. Try to understand what are their goals, what is the board squeezing out of them, and align your outcomes with what they care. Because even if it's like, the coolest thing that you have there on earth, even if you have like numbers of things, if that does not align with what they care and what keeps them, awake at night, it's very difficult to succeed.
What's a good approach to learn about that if you do not have a seat at the table yet, and if you're not sitting in these board meetings and executive meetings?
Yes, I mean, connect with your executives. Be proactive. I think that it's very important for that, and in general for your career. Try to use every opportunity that you have to being like open hours on or like off-site and have a walk and talk with your executives and ask them. They are people too, and they actually like to be heard. So if you approach them with empathy and ask about their challenges and what keeps them, awake at night, you will be surprised. Try to align yourself with that.
Being an exec myself, I also feel like I'm still a human. And when I started my career as a junior, I was always like, oh, I can't talk to these people because they are so much better than I. I can only look dumb in front of them, so I better don't do anything at all. But today I would definitely recommend exactly the same thing. You can't look dumb, even if you just ask, how was your day? Or what's your next vacation? Even if you start being empathetic with your exec teams, I'd argue that most of the people in these teams would definitely react in a rather positive manner to any approach. And then if you can deliver value on top, just do it, because we're human, right?
Absolutely.
Now, fast forward, your journey is crazy enough already, but now, meanwhile, you're not just growth, you're CPTO, a role that is discussed a lot. Is it needed? Is it not needed? Is it good? Is it bad? Where is the friction if there's just one role? Tell me a little bit of background about your current role.
Yes, it depends. Like, a lot of people ask me if I think that it's better to exist a CPTO and the CTO or a CPTO. It really depends on the company, the product itself. It depends on how influent and strong your VPs are. Like and depends also on emotional maturity of the exec itself as well. Because like, this is a very conflicting role. I find myself in many situations that like I want to say something, but like, I know that I can't be so passionate about it, and I'm a very transparent person, so like very difficult for me because I have a responsibility and I have an accountability there, so I need to be much more careful. What I feel is that there needs to be a tension between product and tech, like a healthy tension. So that's that can exist by having a CTO and a CPO, or having like engineering and product leaders that have that healthy tension and know how to manage those. In my particular case, what happened when I joined Leadfeeder, I joined as a CPO. And in our case, our CEO prefers to have one person accountable for it. And since I'm a very curious person, I know how to talk with both worlds. And I think that I have some emotional maturity. I think this is working really well. But of course, that especially although I had the computer science background for academia, I never coded myself. So I need to have very skilled engineering leaders, which I'm very lucky to have to support me, make sure that I support them with my strengths. And we complement each other. And that's the good thing about it. You can never see the executive in a vacuum. You need to see as the system with the leadership team as well.
Yeah, agree. And what surprised you most about the transition from CPO to CPTO?
I mean, I had already a very executive approximation in user-centrics. I was already in the decisions, but right now, maybe what surprises me is the amount of energy and time that I have to spend with non-R&D topics. Although in the past, I was already very connected, with commercial, with revenue, with finance as well, but also, right now in terms of, people, culture, legal, it's really, the amount of energy that we need to spend on these things, which it's good. It's being super good for me and for the team as well. Execs are much busier than I thought.
And not just busier, also the learning curve is a different, because what I learned is in this position, you also need to zoom out much, much more than ever before. Yes, we learn commercial as a PM or as a VP of product, but once you're in that CPO role, you need to understand the full P&L. You need to understand the HR strategy. You need to understand the sales strategy. You need to make sense of everything in order to see how that shapes your own team and your product vision. And this level of systems thinking is something that I really had to adopt to myself.
Yes, absolutely. I find myself thinking a lot of times, oh my God, I thought that these things were so easy with certain things, and realizing no, this is really draining. It's very the reward out of it is it's great and I'm loving it. I think that I was made for this, but it's very draining. Yeah, but I really like it.
There are not many people whom I believe that they are deep in the weeds when it comes to AI. I know many try, and many try to also transform their product organization and build AI products. You are one of the few people that I would immediately believe that you truly know what you're talking about, because you're doing something exciting in your current role, and I want to hear everything about it. The good, the bad, the challenges, the insights.
Yes, I've been so hands-on on this. But it's both super amplifying. It means we look like a magicians, and at the same time it's so challenging and scary, because doing this as an IC, it's very easy. Like me as exec using AI and even have some kind of control is easy. Now, what is very challenging is really making sure that at an IC level, everyone is at the same stage and they are using things in the same way. I reached this point in which the directors level that they are using it in a systematic way. This is something that is not just finding the system. You need to find ways to adapt the system every week. The difficult thing is to change the habits, of the ICs. This is really, really challenging. What I feel is that this increases the gap between the super awesome, ICs and the ones that are a little bit behind are getting, more behind, and the ones that, are really strong are, getting like, even stronger.
And you gave a talk recently about the PM toolkit you've built.
Nowadays, and I think that since the beginning of the year until now, I had like, 10 different setups, but more and more everyone is going into more the direction of the Anthropic stack. But I try to have my setup and my team setup the most tool agnostic. So basically, in the end, our AI stack is a structure of markdown files that live in GitHub, and different people or different teams are responsible for different kind of files. For example, the product strategy and the OKR files are owned by me, and every week I enrich those markdown files in GitHub with things that change decisions in the executive team, and any decision that is made, it's enriched there. For example, we have also the files related with the R&D operating model, roles and responsibilities, templates, the gates between the stages of the product development life cycle, and also agents that we have there that actually control every day and every week if the PRDs, the problem blips, if they are evolving in the time that they should evolve. So, for example, these files are owned by the R&D operations team, and like different people have different responsibilities there to own different things. And the only thing that doesn't live in markdown files is our design system, but our design system lives in Figma right now, but we don't do our designs and prototypes in Figma. Basically, we only use Figma to control and maintain the design system. And then, we use any tool, being Cloud Code, normally with an MCP server for, tool. We used V0 or Magic Patterns, and then it talks with Figma to read the design system and creates directly the prototypes there. But besides design, like everything lives there on the markdown files, and even weekly research on all the calls, all the tickets that we had with customers, synthesized, in terms of strategy for the different product areas. Having agents, looking into all of our competitors and alternatives and doing weekly reviews on that, always for each PM area with the context of their own areas. And then every time that they create, for example, a PRD, they have all this enrichment already. And of course this saves a lot of time. But this also means that now the job of the PMs is two things: decision making and product taste. And these are very senior skills. So this is super cool on the one side. On the other side, this is only super cool if you are a super senior PM, because you need actually read those things. You need to challenge those things, and then you need to have the taste to shape that into, a solution for a problem and make decisions towards that.
Yeah, that sounds like an absolute dream setup. And I'm talking to many, many product leaders, and I know that what you're describing is something that many people are dreaming of. At the same time, what I do here as well is that there are so many obstacles. It starts with compliance and security, so you're not even allowed to use the tools. It starts with something you said earlier, that there is a lot of resistance. Not everyone wants to work with AI, or they just don't feel ready for it or don't know how to do it. But also the organizational maturity needs to be there, because if you don't have an idea about your product operating model, there is no context, so you can't automate things. Now, you're not on that journey for 10 years. You just started. What was the journey and what was the biggest obstacle for you?
Yeah, I was very, very lucky, because when I joined Leadfeeder, we didn't have a product ops team. Okay, and this might seem like a bad thing, but in our case, it was a good thing, because I wrote the first R&D operating model. I wrote it myself. Okay, when I joined, I wrote the R&D operating model. I hired the director of ops. That initially it was for product ops, but now it's R&D ops, and I could shape all these things to this new world. So in this case, it was actually a very nice value prop that we didn't have all these things defined, because it's much easier to create a new thing than changing years of processes and role definitions, and even making the EMs more accountable, like having those talks of like, I don't want the PMs writing tickets, like that's, delivery, and linear is the EMs, and like, so, I could shape these things, and also very lucky with this setup that the team had, because all the EMs and the engineers, they were in the company for a while. Like all the EMs are in the company for more than 5 years kind of thing. So they are very senior and autonomous, and they were very open to actually have these kind of things. And the funny thing, you know what it is? I was never a process-oriented person. Okay, so I was a deep believer that we don't need processes, we need accountability, we need ownership, but like, if everyone knows what they own, like, just do whatever it takes to get it done. But in the age of AI, I deeply believe that processes and operation is one of the most important things. And the cool thing is that you can automate like a big part of operations, but you need to have people that their own concern is to make sure that the machine is working, that we are controlling also from compliance perspective, quality perspective as well, like, actually looking into all the PRDs to making sure that, AI slop, like, and stuff like that. So it was never, from my perspective, never more important to have product ops in organizations.
Fully agreed. Said exactly the same thing in a podcast recently with Antonia Landi and Graham Reed. I'm totally convinced about that too. But still, you said you started Greenfield, there were no processes, so you were lucky again. You talk a lot about luck, but I do not believe in that if I listen to you. You started Greenfield, you took ownership, and I think that's an important angle. But at the same time, rewiring the brains of 80 people, they were in full swing. I'm sure your roadmap was full. I'm sure not everyone was eager to change their way of working because everyone was busy anyways. How did you overcome that initial resistance period?
Yeah. Again, and I'm not going to call it luck again, I will call it an opportunity. But when I joined, there was, especially in engineering, there was like a use of AI that I never saw elsewhere. They were using different tools and so on, but like everyone was already like, inside the AI ship. And we actually had already like AI functionality within the product. We had maybe too much AI functionality in the product. That's another story. But like, from a technical perspective, the team was very AI first. Organizationally, we had some company-wide agents. So the CEO, Kevin, he really wanted to push more for AI. So the environment was good there, but of course that, it's always the early adopters, it's easy to convince. The problem is the rest. And honestly, I feel that this is a twofold solution, let's put it like that. The first thing is that I'm the first one trying everything. Okay, so I'm not just telling them to use, I use it myself, even all the new AI tools. Normally I'm the first person to, use it myself, do something funny about it, during the weekend, show, what are the things that, that I've done, even like these researchers, these agents, setting my first OpenClaw, of course, not in the company computer, IT, okay, I'm not using OpenClaw in our company one, but like giving this example, showing like the cool stuff, and like a big percentage of people started to use as well. And then there's always, especially in Europe, like this long tail of people that have difficulty to change, and then I have to enforce as well. So I'm not afraid also to being popular. I think that comes with the job. And then we need to reinforce, to set some things as mandatory and make them part of performance reviews as well, because the reality is that, we are in a new world, and what we expect from our teams, they are changing. And I think that that's okay. We just need to be very transparent. about it. So I'm very, very transparent about where we need to be and that we need to do much, much more with much, much less.
Okay, wow. That gives me a clear picture that goes beyond luck. What I hear is, yes, you were lucky because there was greenfield, no product operations, no processes documented yet. So you took ownership, you did the whole thing. You hired a product ops director, so you had a multiplier to implement the things you wanted. At the same time, your environment was ready for it. You hadn't had to convince the CEO and everyone because the organizational setup was already moving into that direction. There were early adopters. That was easy. But there's also always that lagging part where people are just resistant for valid reasons, for sure. And then you say that's where leadership comes in and where you also just make the decision that there is no other opportunity than really buying in and going into that direction. And then it becomes a mandatory part of one-on-ones and also review cycles and so on. Got it.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that this is like with everything, especially right now, the world is changing so fast. Managing expectations with your team is the most important thing. I always have this feeling that in every experience that I have, people always complain about, planning and planning things, more project management, more planning. And although we have a much better planning, and we actually did like this survey and the NPS with R&D increased 40% in this first quarter, but I'm always telling people, look, we will never have a perfect planning. Like planning would get worse because things will change much faster, things will be more chaotic, so it's good to have a process, to have transparency. What is important is that like people understand what we are building and why we are building it. So everything that exists in linear need to connect somehow to a strategic pillar or to a very strategic reason, but it needs to be connected. Now changes, I promise, it's the only promise that I can make you is that changes will happen in planning and we need to adapt to it.
Someone asked yesterday if you can decide to have a small team independent without a roadmap, just moving ahead, and the perfect roadmap that is aligned and clear with like achievable milestones, what would you choose? And I'd say always the small team, as long as there is a strategy. You can skip any roadmap. Really, it's just an artifact, and I'd even say an artificial artifact. As long as there's strategy and a smart team, things will always move forward.
Absolutely. And look, it's the first time in my career that I have a roadmap that I'm proud of, because it's a roadmap that, have a lot of different views that even the CEO can consume. And it's connected like from the roadmap to linear. It's also very flexible because like, for example, we only have right now the roadmap until the end of Q2, we have the goals until the end of the year, but like, how things are changing, we have a roadmap until the end of Q2 that is completely connected with all the strategy, all the pillars, and to the things that actually exist in linear. And like, I think that the fact that I have this roadmap right now, this is like a consequence of like the other things that are working. And mind that many things are not working, right? Because like we are people. This is, a product built by people. Decisions change for valid reasons or sometimes for invalid reasons because we don't do our jobs like we should. And that's human as well, right? So it's not that it's perfect, but like it's transparent and we can act on it. So I'm not afraid of like something that will come out of the box and mess the party from one day to the other.
Yeah. So the roadmap is the outcome of the hard work you were putting into creating the right organization, the right roles, the right processes, automating wherever possible. And now you're rewarded with a roadmap that is up to date, transparent, and available to everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. And choosing the right people, because my director of product ops, he's really, really good maintaining these things, because we also know that one thing is to do the first version of anything or of R&D operating model, of a roadmap, whatsoever. Another completely different thing is to maintain it, over time and make it, maintain it alive.
Yeah, maintenance is definitely a hard part.
Yes.
I have one last question. What is the one thing that keeps you awake at night? And if a fairy comes and you can change it right away, what would that be?
Yeah, So I think that the one thing that keeps me more awake at night is the future of product management. I feel that this wave right now of senior product managers that, saw the before AI, like it's amazing, for this profile. I'm worried about junior PMs. Unfortunately, I'm very sure that they don't have the maturity to like digest those things that are now done, via AI, and also because that's what builds the two things that the PMs need, which is the taste and decision making. It's actually those experiences. Like the taste is not something that it's magically comes. It's like it's something that you build over your career. So like this makes me a little bit worried about product management in 5-10 years, and also makes me worried about the product managers that are out there and that they are not that senior. So I think that this in a new world it will be more difficult to find new jobs that they can actually succeed in, because I actually believe that there will be a lot of more jobs for senior product managers, because we still need to solve the problems, and because although we can do much more, the expectations of the users are also much higher. So in reality, we need to build better products that solve more problems in more complex ways, and the expectations are very similar to other things in the past. So that is the thing that probably worries me the most.
Yeah. What can a person do that wants to transition into product management?
Yes, so I believe there are like adjacent careers to product that I believe that turn into like very, very good product managers. One thing that might be unpopular, but more and more I feel that you need to have at least the theoretical technical background. It's important more than ever to understand how things are built, even if you never have to actually write code, but having like this systems thinking on how things work in the background gets more important. This mixed with customer facing experiences as well, because of this age, it's more and more important to build empathy toward the users or the customers that you are building towards. So emotional maturity and technical understanding, it's more important, and I think that more and more PMs will come from a technical background, and like in generally for any role, what I tell people is look to people that you really admire and like look how they got there, and talk with that people, like reach them out on LinkedIn. Eventually someone will actually answer back to you, and mimic that. I always tell people to act a mandate above of what they are. Don't expect to be promoted to do the job. Start to do the job. Show that you can do it. Mimic like great professionals, and things will happen.
Yeah, lovely. I learned a ton. I learned that what can be sold as luck in reality is hard work. I love to hear that everything feels magically and lucky for you. But I also do see that you are a very inspiring and ambitious leader. Definitely a role model for many, many other female product people out there. So thanks for taking the time today to share your story. I loved every single piece I learned from you.
Thank you so much, and thank you for everything that you share with the community. Like always super relevant and like to the heart, content. So please keep doing that.